From the perspective of interests, Trump's short-term policies is that the financial war has ended. Ukraine has lost its cooperation and the U.S.'s role in forcing capital to return. America doesn't want to continue investing in Ukraine, so ending the Russia-Ukraine conflict is just the first step for the long-term strategy of the United States to divide the economic and energy structure of Russia and Europe is still its highest strategic goal. Hello everyone, I'm Jeffrey. This is just Spit Out. Today I want to talk about why Ukraine fans shouldn't cry. America hasn't changed. With Trump's rise to power, America underwent a 180-degree shift in its attitude towards Russia. Many people are confused by America's foreign strategy, especially those who were once Ukraine fans. They became Ukraine fans because Ukraine was America's war proxy. But now that America's attitude toward Ukraine has drastically changed, many of these former supporters feel betrayed by America, just like Zelensky. At the same time, America-European strategy and its relationship with Russia are hard to understand. On the surface, it seems like America's foreign policy is chaotic, but if you look at it from an interest-based perspective, it might reveal a different picture. America is intentionally using its democratic system to exploit its allies. In simple terms, America's foreign strategy centers on interests. And if there is any contradiction here, it's that short-term and long-term interests sometimes conflict depending on the timing and geopolitical context. Some pursue long-term benefits, others short-term, but neither truly considers the interests of Ukraine or Europe. For those like Ukraine, which serves America, or the EU countries that view America as a core ally, this might be hard to accept, but in reality, it's the truth. For the US, there have never been values-based allies, only varying degrees of blood bags. From an interest-based view, looking back at the Russia-Ukraine conflict and its current hasty conclusion, you'll see that the U.S. has maintained relative consistency in strategic interests. However, with its declining power, this sharp turn is no longer as smooth as it used to be, resulting in public outrage and suspicion. This is itself a reflection of America's waning strength. Looking at the background of the Russia-Ukraine conflict, it's clear that two forces have always been behind Ukraine's fans: the U.S. and the core European countries of France and Germany. These forces can be understood as a Western alliance under U.S. leadership, with countries from across the Western world providing military aid to Ukraine. In this conflict, who has lost and who has gained? From the current situation, we see that the interests of Russia, Ukraine, and European countries have all been harmed. Both sides of the war have suffered, and their economic and energy structures have been deeply damaged. But behind every war, there are winners as well as losers. From America's perspective, the timing of the Russia-Ukraine conflict perfectly aligned with America's financial war and the interest rate hike cycle. From a geopolitical security standpoint, it met the demand for European capital to flow to the U.S. Throughout America's interest rate hike cycle, more than $1 trillion in financial and industrial capital flowed from Europe to America. In this regard, the benefits the U.S. has gained far outweigh its investment in the Ukraine conflict. But most of these profits have been reaped by America's financial and military industrial capital. So, what fundamental changes happened when Trump came to power that caused such a dramatic shift in policy compared to Biden's? From a financial perspective, the most significant change was America's transition from a rate hike cycle to a rate cut cycle. In this context, when we look at the role the Russia-Ukraine conflict played in the U.S. financial cycle, we can better understand Trump's policy shift. The financial war drove European capital back to America, and the Russia-Ukraine conflict played a key supporting role. Now, as the U.S. enters a rate cut cycle, its primary task is to create a price dip in assets and successfully buy at the bottom. With the U.S. no longer able to exploit its opponents, it will now turn to its allies. When combined with Trump's version of isolationism, these actions may appear to point to abandoning Europe. However, this is merely a surface-level tactic. What's really happening is a strategic move to abandon Europe to induce panic, setting the stage to later reclaim Europe and gain deep control over Europe's core assets. Without Europe, even if the U.S. controls all of North America, it cannot compete with China. North America's population is under 500 million, while China has more than 1 billion people in its economy. From this perspective, America must closely ally with Europe to have any competitive foundation. Without Europe, even if the U.S. controls all of North America, it cannot compete with China. North America's population is under 500 million, while China has more than 1 billion people in its economy. From this perspective, America must closely ally with Europe to have any competitive foundation. From the angle of short-term U.S. policy, the financial war is over. Ukraine has lost its role in forcing capital back. And the U.S. doesn't want to continue investing in Ukraine, so ending the Russia-Ukraine conflict is only the first step. For America's long-term strategy, dividing Russia and Europe's economic and energy structures remains its top priority. Under this goal, the best move is for the U.S. to stop aiding Ukraine, and for European countries to take on that responsibility, continuing to confront Russia. Now, Trump's rhetoric about full reconciliation with Russia is just the first step in pressuring Europe. The next step will be waiting for Europe to offer a new deal, and then Europe will be left to take the lead in the confrontation with Russia. In this way, for the U.S., it can end its investment in Ukraine once the rate cut cycle is over, and after the Russia-Ukraine conflict ends, continue dividing Russia and Europe, preparing for the next phase of extracting value from Europe. So, America's strategy towards Ukraine and Europe hasn't changed. What's dazzling is simply Trump's rhetoric. He's a true performer, to the point where many forget that he is ultimately serving U.S. strategic interests.